Squishies, and welcome back to another vlog. This is another of my series on propaganda cartoons. This time we are covering 1939's Peace on Earth and 1955's Goodwill Toward Men, which was a remake of Peace on Earth. Obviously, this is a seasonal thing, a holiday thing. I'm doing it because I'm recording this on December the 24th. And they are both Christmas-themed cartoons, but, of course, because I passionately despise all things to do with Christmas, and especially all pop cultural things around Christmas, I picked two incredibly cynical cautionary tales that involve the complete extinction of humanity. That being what these are. They are cautionary tales, they are anti-war cartoons. Now, all the propaganda cartoons I've covered up to this point have been World War II era pro-war cartoons, cartoons that were trying to galvanize the Americans, and in one or two cases the Canadians, to fight against the Nazis. Which, of course, as people to fight against go, Nazis are probably your best choice. But there's also been plenty of cartoons focused on other things, propagandizing other positions, and so here we have two classics of the anti-war cartoon genre, of which they are far from alone. It's interesting the differences between them, though. The 1939 one is, I think, the more effective of the two. Right from the opening shot of like the silhouettes of soldiers with guns in gas masks hunched over, streaming past in front of a ruined church. That's just a very powerful, like, mid-20th century war image that resonates really strongly with the message of the cartoon. Both cartoons are basic, like I said, the 55 one is a remake of the 39 one, so they're both basically the same premise of an older, cute animal telling his grandchildren or other young cute animals the story of how humanity wiped themselves out and the cute animals inherited the earth. Like I said, the 1939 one is, I think, a lot more effective. The animals are, in my opinion, a little bit more expressive. The 55 one uses character designs that are very reminiscent of Jerry from Tom and Jerry, and that just has always felt to me like a little too static of a design, if that makes any sense. I just don't feel they get the expressiveness across as well as the more golden agey, very mobile, very stretchy and squishy kind of characters that we get in the older cartoon. Which is another thing that the older one is an MGM cartoon, the latter one is Hanna-Barbera. So that right there, there's a little bit of a difference in production quality because, of course, Hanna-Barbera was working on somewhat smaller budgets, especially by the 50s. So the other thing that makes it more effective is that the older one is a little bit more personal. The last soldiers on Earth, we see the last two soldiers on Earth. We see one of them get shot and then shoot the other and then die very dramatically. It really hammers across the point that the last man on Earth uses the last of his strength to kill the second to last man on Earth. Which is, making a point about human nature as being incredibly violent. Or if not human nature, at least what we've chosen to be. It also, in the little brief history of warfare it gives, takes a very different tack. The 55 one, understandably, for like the height of the Cold War and fear of the atom bomb, takes a technological path. It talks about humans making better and better means of killing each other until finally they create the ultimate bombs and blow each other up in a nuclear war. The 39 cartoon, of course, predates the invention of the atomic bomb, and so it's less about the technology and more about this idea of us and them. That humans are constantly dividing ourselves into opposing camps, and if we could all just set that aside and cooperate, this wouldn't be a problem, but instead, it picks deliberately absurd examples, like vegetarians having a war with meat eaters. And we don't actually know what causes the last two people are fighting for, but it's heavily implied that they're not worth it. 55 cartoon makes no mention of causes, it's just about the technology. Which again, I think lends more strength to the 39 one, because while it was a big deal in the middle of the 20th century, rapidly advancing technology for killing people, ultimately, technology does what it's used to do. The decision to use it to kill is the bigger issue, and the root issue. Both cartoons, though, it's propaganda. It expresses a point of view. In this case, it's expressing a very Christian point of view in both the positive and negative senses. In the positive sense, it's got a couple of Bible quotes of stuff that probably would be helpful. Things like don't kill, treat others as thyself. In other words, treat other people like people, and rebuild the wastes. Okay. Although, notably, that last one is not phrased as a commandment in the Bible. It's phrased as a prediction of something they will do, they presumably being the Jews returned from exile in Babylon, because that's around when the book of Isaiah was written. Anyway, the point is stuff that seems like generally good advice. Unfortunately, there's also kind of unstated the implication that it would all be fine if everybody just believed in the same things in the same ways, which is kind of begging the question a bit. It's that whole grand narrative thing of, there wouldn't be conflict if everyone agreed all the time. And while technically true, that's also really creepy and disturbing. It's like saying there wouldn't be fighting between the vegetarians and the meat eaters if there were no meat eaters, which I'm sure in this war that we're imagining is what the vegetarians would think, but it's not actually going to stop the war. That's just an argument for more killing. For the vegetarians, it's an argument for trying to kill or convert all the meat eaters, and for the meat eaters, it's an argument that they're engaged in self-defense. And I mean, it only takes one look at the history of Christianity to see that wherever it has taken the attitude of everyone should be Christian, it has produced things like crusades and inquisitions. And, okay, yes, that's an inherent problem with Christianity as a whole because it's constructed as a grand narrative, but at its root, the problem is that it's a grand narrative. It is possible to separate much of the religion from the grand narrative and create a version that isn't about trying to get everybody into one place of worship and one mode of belief. But those forms of it that do, and it does kind of require a bit of pushing against the historical construction of the religion in order to get it not to. those versions of Christianity that do that are always going to end up anywhere that they get into power, abusing that power, because that's what grand narratives do. They create us's and them's. They create violence against the people who don't fit. That's the whole problem. Vegetarians and meat eaters are completely capable of coexisting up until the point at which they try to change each other. That's when they start fighting. And that's true of almost any belief system or identity or anything like that. I say almost any because there are a lot of belief systems out there that are constructed in such a way that they cannot be separated from their grand narrative, that they have to force everyone around them to join or else. And that then has to be opposed in kind because it's not right. You can't actually coexist with fascists. You can coexist with people of almost any political ideology, even some that I find extremely noxious, but the minute you get into fascists, you can't, and that's just one example. Anybody really of the belief that their way is the only right way, and everyone else must be made to accept that, is going to be impossible to coexist with, because they refuse to coexist with anyone else. So, really, if you wanted the real source of these kinds of conflicts, it's the grand narratives and the competition between them. Of course, then you get into the whole question of, if we have lots and lots of differing little narratives, they're always going to be conflicting with each other. There's always going to be, at the borders, places where people disagree over what should be done. To which my response is, great, good. That's how it should be. That's how the world is an interesting place. Again, as long as people aren't imposing stuff via force or abuse of power. Of course, they always have. And that's where, again, these problems arise. In the end, these are both very cynical cartoons. Cautionary tales kind of have to be. They more or less the purpose of a cautionary tale is to show the worst case scenario. So it has to assume that everything goes as bad as it possibly can. And that's definitely what happens here. But they are very cynical. Their basic attitude is that humans can come up with nice sounding ideas, but are incapable of actually putting them into practice. Which, again, history suggests there might be some truth to that, but the problem with going with history there is that history tends to be written by the winners, and for most of history, the winners have been the people who were better at killing each other. So, of course, that's what history would show. The question is whether we can go a different way. And we kind of have to assume such. We at least have to try, because otherwise, what's the point? We may as well let the squirrels and mice take over. Of course, the question of whether any squirrels or mice would survive a nuclear war is left unanswered. I don't know that fallout and radiation poisoning were that well understood by the general public in 1955. I would have to do some research to see that, But again, they're remaking an older cartoon that predates nuclear weapons, so even though the weapons are implied, the final weapons are implied to be nuclear in the 55 one, we can sort of take it as given that they weren't. Anyway, that's my happy, cheery Christmas episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my Patreon for early access for vlogs, essays, let's plays, and more. And I'll see you all next time. Bye!